Hi, my name is Eduardo Ox, this person here, and the title of this video is how to create hyperlinks to here with find-eev links. This is I'm going to suppose that everyone knows what's Emacs and what is eev, at least vaguely. And one of the main ideas of eev is that when you are taking executable notes of something that you're doing, if you find something interesting, you want to be able to create a hyperlink to that something. And usually you're going to be doing things with Emacs. So if you find something interesting, this is going to be in an Emacs buffer usually, and you want to create a hyperlink to that Emacs buffer and to some position in that buffer. Okay, let me start. All the tutorials of eev have headers like these headers here. The header is all this thing here, but the headers always have a part like this that recommend other tutorials. We are going to use a bit of this tutorial here. That's not a real tutorial, it's an index of the basic keys of eev and of Emacs with hyperlinks to the documentation. We are going to use these two sections in it. And we are also going to use a bit of this tutorial here that is about find-eev links, and that explains these ideas of switching between tasks and nodes, creating hyperlinks to important things, and so on. And we are going to use a bit of this tutorial here about refining hyperlinks. Let me start with these two sections of the tutorial that is not a real tutorial, it's just an index of keys. These two sections, I've copied them here. And we are going to start with the beginner's way of creating hyperlinks to here, except that we are going to start with this thing here that is very simple. So there's a sequence of keys, meta-h, meta-2, that just duplicates the current line. Remember that the help for the key for help for keys in eev is meta-h, meta-k, and if you type meta-h, meta-k, meta-h, meta-2, you get a buffer like this with lots of links. This one is exactly this link here, and one of the other links is the link to the source code of this function. No, sorry, for the description of that function. And it says that it just duplicates the current line without any changes to the kill ring. There's an example in the tutorial Find Refining Intro, the introduction about refining hyperlinks. And this example has an executable part here. It says try blah 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 blah, try these two sexps. And let's suppose that we execute this. The effect of executing this is exactly the same as marking a region and typing meta w, which copies that to the kill ring. And in this line here of the example, well, this is a sequence of keys, and this sexp executes that sequence of keys. And what it does is it goes down, it duplicates this line, and then it runs meta-h, meta-y, which is something that I'm going to explain soon. So meta-h, meta-2 just duplicates the current line. You can use it with the cursor at any point, and it does not change the top of the kill ring. It's still tools 4 that I've killed 30 seconds ago. So the first key is the first most basic key is this one, and I've demonstrated without explaining what is this other key that is going to be very important later, but it's not something that beginners learn in the first 30 minutes, say. When I explain these things to beginners, I usually start by explaining things in a 3-window setting. I'm going to use this figure here to explain what this thing is, and let me just tell a story about what I mean by beginners. I sometimes teach Emacs to people that have never tried Emacs before, and I've had an opportunity to teach a mini course on LaTeX in which I could choose the editor that I would force the students to use. And I wanted to use Emacs, and my excuse for using Emacs was that if you're going to learn LaTeX, most of the time when you want to learn how to do something and you look at the internet how to do that something, the answer is usually going to be like use the package such and such. And the easiest way of using these things and to learn how to use all these packages is to install a full distribution of LaTeX in your system, and then you're going to get about 4,000 packages, and then you're going to need a way to navigate by these packages, look at their documentation, look at examples, try the examples, and so on, and Emacs and AV are the perfect thing for that. So I've had the opportunity to give this course, and so I taught Emacs and AV for, say, 10 people, and I got a lot of feedback, and it was very useful to me, and they liked it. And so this is one trick that is mainly meant for people that don't know the keys of Emacs, and we don't want to force them to memorize many things at once. I will need to switch to a smaller font here. I'm going to explain this two sequence of keys. meta-h, meta-3 switches to a certain configuration with three windows, and meta-h, meta-1 goes back to the configuration that we had before. If I type meta-h, meta-3 here, now I get this configuration with three windows in which this thing here is the target buffer, this thing here is the Emacs hyperlinks buffer, and this thing here is the buffer with nodes. But, and if I type meta-h, meta-1, I go back to the original window configuration. And the original window configuration can be anything. For example, if I run this sexp here, I get this very weird window configuration. And if I type meta-h, meta-3, I get this one. And if I type meta-h, meta-1, I go back to my weird configuration that I had before. So in the window configuration with three windows, if I want to create a hyperlink to here, to this file where is the script for this video, well, at this moment I want to create a hyperlink to here, but when I create this configuration with three windows, it's no longer practical to refer as distinct to here, because sometimes my cursor was going to be here, so sometimes here, so I need another terminology. This thing becomes the target buffer, and I want to create a hyperlink that points to this target buffer and copy it to my nodes. So this is a hyperlink that points to that target buffer here, and I can copy it to my nodes. But let me explain how I teach this to beginners. Besides teaching them how to use meta-h, meta-3 and meta-h, meta-1, I also teach them how to use meta-h, meta-w, which is copy the current line, copy this line to the kill ring. So my cursor is here, and if I type meta-h, meta-w, I get this message in the echo area: copied the current line to the kill ring, use Ctrl-I to paste. And I can go to my buffer with nodes, I can copy this thing with Ctrl-Y, and now I can return to the previous configuration. So this is what I teach to the students in the first moment when I give these mini courses, or when I'm teaching Emacs to someone who have never used Emacs before. I mean Emacs and EV, sorry. we get the target buffer. We copy the right line to the kill ring with meta-h, meta-w, and then we paste that line with Ctrl-Y. When people know a few more keys, then they can also use Ctrl-W or meta-W. And remember that in Emacs the terminology is very different from cut, copy, and paste. And here are hyperlinks to the keys in Emacs that correspond to cut, copy, and paste. Okay, next step. I've mentioned briefly that we can use meta-h, meta-w to refine a hyperlink in a certain way. We saw this tutorial here, in which I copied this tools for to the kill ring, and then with this sexp here, I duplicated this line, and then I refined it in a certain way by adding the top of the kill ring as a string at the end of the sexp. So this is what we are going to do now. Just let me show us an example without that much clutter in the screen. Suppose that I've copied this thing with the to the kill ring with meta-w, then I can duplicate this line and use meta-h, meta-w. So at this stage, what we are going to do is that we are going to switch to the 3-window setting with meta-h, meta-3, and then I'm going to find the right hyperlink. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to refine it by adding the string at the end of the sexp. I'm going to copy the 2 lines to the kill ring, and I'm going to copy them to the notes buffer. Let me demonstrate this. Suppose that I want to create a hyperlink to this string here. So meta-h, meta-3. Then this is the hyperlink that I want to use, but I'm going to duplicate it, refine it, and then I'm going to copy these 2 lines to my notes. So this hyperlink here points exactly to this string in this file with the script for my video. Let me go back to the previous window setting. Let me use a bigger font again. Obviously, all these things can be done using a single window. I'm not doing that just because it's more simple to explain that to newcomers by using the 3-window setting. But I can just type meta-h, meta-h to get a buffer with hyperlinks. I can duplicate this line, I can refine this line, I can copy these 2 lines to the kill ring, I can go to my buffer with notes, and I can copy this to my notes. And then suppose that I delete the links that are not very relevant. And I can go back to the buffer where I was before, usually by using meta uppercase K twice. Meta uppercase K is similar to kill this buffer, but it doesn't kill the buffer, it just buries the buffer at the bottom of the pile of buffers associated to a certain window. This hyperlink here is just to remember me that I copied this diagram from this tutorial in this position. Okay, next step. This is something very advanced that is only makes sense to people that have been using EV for at least some hours, and they have created their own anchors, and they want to create hyperlinks to those anchors. Let me start by showing the part of the tutorial that explains what anchors are. There's this section here that explains that this thing here is what we are going to call an anchor, and this string inside the green double angle quotes is what we call a tag. And when we run a sexp like this sexp searches for this tag wrapped in the green double angle brackets. So this sexp here searches for this string, this sexp here searches for this string, this sexp here searches for this string here, and this sexp here searches for this string here. So if I execute meta-a several times here, I get this behavior, which is not very useful, but in many cases I have an index at the beginning of the file which is full of lines that are of this form, a dot, an anchor with a dot, and then a tag pointing to this anchor here. So these two anchors point to one another. If I type meta-a in each one, I go to the other one. And the tutorial also explains how to create these pairs made of an index and a section anchor, well, wherever. It's by using meta shift A. If I use meta shift A in this line here, it duplicates the line and it converts this line into this thing here. And it also explains how to use meta shift B that creates something like this block here. And my files with nodes are full of blocks formatted in this way, but I move these things to the beginning of the file, to the index. So again, this part of the tutorial explains what anchors are and how to create anchors, but it only explains how to use to, which is this thing here. But let's see a more realistic example. Most of the source files in EEV have anchors. Here's an example. Oh, sorry. Here's an example. Here I have the one of the source files that defines many hyperlinks to temporary buffers generated by templates. It's called evtlinks. And here we have an index here, and each line of this index points to the corresponding definition. So this sexp here is equivalent to this sexp here, and note that when I've reduced the name by dropping this file at the end of the function, this reduced sexp points to an anchor. So if I execute this, it searches for this string wrapped as an anchor. Not all functions created by codecd behave in that way. Only the functions that have this extra argument here, anchor. And one of the tutorials explains how this thing with how this extra argument works. I'm not going to explain this in details, but the thing is that if we execute, okay, let me give the short explanation. If we execute this, then this function is going to produce a certain string, and then is going to interpret that string as Lisp code, and this string is a series of definition of functions. So this sexp here is like a button that defines several new functions, and this sexp here shows the code that this sexp produces, but this one does not execute the code, it just shows the code. The code is here, so we can see that it has a set queue, and then a series of defuns that define functions, and it also has this defun at the end that defines find-eev without, not find-eev, it's not find-eev file, it's just find-eev, and find-eev without the suffix file at the end uses another function called find-anchor to point to this file here, in the position specified by the post spec list. Okay, so this explains how the function find-eev was defined, and this tutorial also explains how to shrink this hyperlink to something like this hyperlink here. It explains what is my meaning of the term shrinking in the context of eev, and it has a demo here. It explains that we can shrink the hyperlink at the current line with meta h meta minus. If we execute meta h meta minus in this line here, it shrinks it in a certain way. And if we type meta h meta minus in this line here, it does nothing. So here it shrinks, it deletes the file, and it reformats the rest, and here it does nothing, and whatever. And we also have an advanced key that lets us copy to the kill ring the preceding tag. Let me explain what is that. Remember that meta h meta w copies the current line to the kill ring. Remember that after copying it to the kill ring, we can insert it with Ctrl Y. There's a variant of meta h meta w that works like this. When we invoke meta h meta w with a numeric argument, usually as this, meta 1 meta h meta w, then instead of copying the current line, it just copies the tag of the previous anchor. So if the cursor is here, the previous anchor is here, the preceding anchor is this one, and the preceding tag is this one. And it also explains in the echo area what it does. So let's try it here. Meta 1 meta h meta w. Ta-da! It flashes this string for a fraction of a second, and it says copied, blah blah blah. It says the string here to the kill ring. If I type Ctrl Y here, I see copies of that hyperlink, of that string. And if I use meta h meta y here, I refine this hyperlink to include this thing here. In this example, the refined hyperlink is not very useful, but here is a demo that makes more sense. Let me go back to this source file here. If I type meta 1 meta h meta w here, then it copies this string here to the kill ring. Let me switch to the 3-window setting and to a smaller font. I'm going to take this hyperlink here. I'm going to duplicate this line, refine it, and then shrink it. And then this is a hyperlink that points to this file here, eev-tlinks, to an anchor with this tag. So if I execute this sexp here, this thing opens eev-tlinks.el and goes to this anchor. Let me go back to the 1-window setting. Let me go back. Yeah, that's it. That's all that I wanted to show in this video. So that's it. Bye.